Is there a time and place for talking about endocrine disruptors? Sure. But why are we skipping the basics of move your body, lift some weights,
Eat
bump
protein.
up your calories, eat your protein, lower your stress?
Welcome to the Birth Lounge podcast, an empowering space for expecting and new parents to hear candid conversations with experts, support your mental health, and learn the tips and tricks that thousands of parents have used to craft their ideal birth. We will answer all of your questions, the scary ones and the weird ones, to help calm your fears and feel confident going into your birth. I'm going to help you redefine what birth and motherhood looks like and how to embrace your journey. I've intentionally crafted a list of experts to help you navigate pregnancy, explore your birth options, and plan for postpartum so that it can be a time of soaking in your tiny human. We're going to go there on all the hard topics so that you can dive deep into finding your confidence and freeing yourself from fears around birth. With over 10 years of experience in family education and a master's degree in human development and family studies, I created this podcast as a way to share the resources parents need to make educated and informed decisions about their care in pregnancy and childbirth. This is a birth community driven by evidence-based information and research in hopes to help you explore your options, understand your rights, and know what choices you have along the way when it comes to birth and beyond. I'm your host, HeHe. Now let's get to the good stuff. Hello, have you heard about my completely free class that teaches you 6 evidence-based ways to avoid a C-section and reduce your tearing in labor by up to 50%? And remember, I mentioned it was completely free. This class is going to teach you how to advocate for your preferences in the birth room so that you can have a birth that's filled with joy and not birth trauma. Advocating for yourself starts with being empowered with the right information so that you can ask the right questions and confidently make decisions during labor based on what feels good to you and your baby. But here's the thing. The U.S. has one of the highest C-section rates in the world, and it is ever climbing year after year. And it's not because the system is broken, albeit it is, but it's really because women don't have the tools to navigate that broken system. We may not be able to change the system before you have your baby, but what we can do is change how you operate within that system. Change the conversations that you're having with your providers. Change the places that you are getting your information to help you have informed conversation with your doctor before you have your baby. I want to teach you how to do that. We know the reasons that our C-section rates are climbing. We know the reasons that inductions happen so often, and we know the reasons that babies end up in the NICU. I want to help you avoid all of that so that you can have a birth that you love. You can find my free class at thebirthlounge.com/C-section so that you can learn 6 evidence-based ways to avoid a C-section and reduce your tearing in labor. Again, that is thebirthlounge.com/C-section. See you there. Bye. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Birth Lounge podcast. You guys, if you have not had a chance to check out our new app, the Birth Lounge app, go ahead and go to your app store and do that now. I have been working tirelessly around the clock in between births and consults and seeing clients to make this the best app possible. Inside the Birth Lounge app, not only will you find our Birth Lounge membership and our other courses like the Dad Days course and our Secret Sauce to Pushing course, but you're also going to find evidence-based articles that will help you have an evidence-based pregnancy and birth. I've broken down the most common topics that come up and even ones that aren't super common so that you can have the latest, most up-to-date data. Plus, at the end of each evidence-based article, I give you 10 to 15 questions that you can take into your provider to have a discussion about this so that you can be informed and confident about your decisions surrounding whatever topic it is. From due dates to the science behind birth plans to preeclampsia and low-dose aspirin to preparing for a C-section, recovering from a C-section. How do you know the data around induction, 39-week induction, medically necessary induction, induction for different reasons, X, Y, and Z, that you might run into in your prenatal appointments? We've gathered all the evidence for you, plus we are always asking for feedback. So if there's a topic that you don't see in the Birth Lounge app, we really encourage our users to drop in their suggestions, and we will get that evidence-based article written for you and published inside the app. It is truly one of the things I am most proud of in my business because it has brought evidence-based, data-driven information to your back pocket. You no longer need a PhD or an MD to understand evidence-based options so that you can make informed choices in a confident manner, not out of fear. Long gone are the days of you walking into your OBGYN or midwife appointment and not knowing what to ask, or feeling overwhelmed with the 6-minute visit and walking out to your car and being like, golly, I wish I had asked this, or I wish I had remembered to ask this. The Birth Lounge app not only will tell you the questions that you should be asking about this, but it will give you the science and the data so that you can have an informed discussion with your provider to pick whatever feels best to you and something that makes your provider feel comfortable. Or maybe it will uncover the fact that you and your provider are not a good match, and it will encourage you. And we do have an evidence-based article on how to switch providers. All of our PDF downloads that are available to the general public and available in the Birth Lounge membership are also available in the app. You'll have access to connect with me and my team, and you can listen to the podcast right from the app. I'm telling you, when I say this has been a labor of love, I absolutely mean it. Please head to your app store, download the Birth Lounge app, and start to be empowered today, right now. All right, enough about me and my app. Now, I'd like to shift gears to today's episode, and boy, is it one that I'm so excited about. I'm absolutely over the moon to have on a friend and colleague, Amanda Howell. Now, you may know her from Instagram, which is where I first met her as well. Amanda and I have been longtime Instagram friends, and we share common interests and thoughts and feelings about many subjects. Amanda is a dedicated public health professional and a current Master of Science in Nursing student specializing in women's health. She focuses on pre- and postnatal nutrition and fitness. One of the things that I love so much about her is her commitment to providing evidence-based insights that empower women to make informed decisions. She doesn't come to the table with judgment, and she's not going to make you feel bad for the decisions that you make. Instead, she arms you with the evidence and the science and the data that you need to have a healthy and strong pregnancy. She emphasizes the vital connection between proper nutrition during pregnancy and improved health outcomes, and she's always striving to support women through education, advocacy, and accessible resources. I am so excited for you to join this conversation because today we're diving into protein in pregnancy, something that not only do I talk about with every single one of our one-to-one clients, but I'm also always preaching it in my personal life. I'm always talking about it inside the Birth Lounge, and of course, you guessed it, inside the Birth Lounge app. Today's episode, we're going to talk about what are current protein recommendations, what are the benefits, how does it actually improve you and your baby's health outcomes, what are the different types of protein. If you're like me, you didn't realize that there were two main sources of protein, so you need to be considerate of where you're getting your protein. Also, there are supplements obviously on the market that will help increase your protein intake, but how do you know the quality of supplements? And this is especially important for someone who's trying to conceive, if you're like me and on your TTC journey. And I would say doubly especially important for someone who is pregnant, because everything that you put into your body obviously goes to your baby's body. We're going to talk about the benefits of protein for egg and sperm production and what negative consequences might come from inadequate protein intake. Don't worry, Amanda's going to break it down by trimester so that you know exactly how much protein you should be getting each stage of pregnancy. And something that I wasn't expecting, but she's going to dive into how protein actually improves your recovery post-birth, plus how it can improve your breastfeeding journey. I think the idea that protein is super needed and important for us is not a new one. However, I don't think a lot of us realize just how important it is, especially for those of us who are thinking about expanding our families or already pregnant. So without further ado, Amanda, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I feel like this has been a very long time coming.
Same. When we logged on, I was like, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you like in real life offline. And it's so fun for me to be able to meet people that I love on the internet and I learn so much from in real life, like on the podcast. Not only does it make you feel like a real human, but it just lets me know that there are people out there that truly do care about women's health, getting women whole care, helping women truly make informed decisions. And so, oh, I have chills. This is just so good. I'm so excited for this. And obviously, it's a topic that's on a lot of our minds, right? Like protein is something that I think a lot of us hear about. A lot of us know it's important, but how important and how much should we really be getting and where do we get the protein? So before we dive into the real nitty gritty, can you give us the basics of what we need to know going into this conversation? Is our protein intake based on our age, our weight, whether it's your first pregnancy, second pregnancy? What do we need to know before we actually dive into protein?
And I feel like this conversation is tough because you have two ends of the spectrum. You have people usually online yelling about how we're either getting way too much protein or how we're not getting enough. And usually it's coming from like sports science and then like medicine, right? So there's two ends of the spectrum. And ideally, we want to fall, per usual, somewhere in the middle. I always like to start with recommended daily allowance. So that's the RDA. You hear about that all the time. It's a very modest zero point 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. For someone who weighs like 150 pounds, for instance, they would only need 55 grams of protein using RDA.
Per
What,
day.
yes, per day. What we have learned over time as we do more research and science evolves is that is not ideal. That is the bare minimum necessary to meet like basic nutrition requirements. So it's the minimum amount you need to keep from getting sick and to prevent malnutrition. We obviously want to do a little bit better than that. Our goal is to not just be slightly above malnourished, right? More recent evidence suggests that a minimum of 1.2 grams per kilogram per day is actually a better target. So that would mean about 82 grams of protein for someone who weighs 150 pounds. And then we can even go a step further there, though. So when we're trying to optimize our health, which a lot of your listeners are trying to do for fertility specifically, we don't want to just strive for the minimum, right? We definitely want to strive for better, best, optimal. So if we start taking things into account like supporting fertility, immune function, insulin sensitivity, trying to conceive, growing whole human, we see that the best range is actually 1.4 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram. So that means if you're about 150 pounds, that's going to be 95 to 136 grams. Obviously, we don't want to blanket approach everything, but for most people, you are not getting enough protein. When we actually look at the evidence, we actually look at the data, we look at what is bare minimum and optimal, most people are actually falling painfully short.
Okay, so let me ask you this. As you gain weight in pregnancy, should our protein intake kind of match that? So first trimester, and we'll talk about like how do you get in protein when you can't really eat very much, but second trimester, are we up in that intake? And then third trimester, we really need to up it and prioritize that. How does that work since that's a fluctuating and temporary weight gain due to pregnancy?
Yes. So my goal is not to stress out people who are pregnant. There is enough stress already with every other single thing going on. My approach is if we can just optimize our protein intake prior to pregnancy, and then we all know that during first trimester, it's probably optimal is not going to happen, which is fine. We'll talk about that a little bit in the next couple bits, but it's probably not going to be great. But second and third trimester is actually where you want to beef up your protein a little bit because baby is growing bones and organs and all sorts of good stuff where protein is necessary. But I basically say optimize your protein prior to getting pregnant. And then if you can just maintain that like 1.4 to 2 grams, you're in a really good place. It gets really difficult if you try to tweak your calories and your protein intentionally each trimester. Do some people do it, especially like high level athletes? Sure. But most of us are not high level athletes who need to get that detailed, right? So if you can just start, it's more of a behavior thing, right? If you start learning what optimal protein looks for you before getting pregnant, what those meals look like, what those snacks look like, and you can just, for the most part, maintain that during pregnancy, you're in a really good place. And there are so many benefits of protein during the trying to conceive period, during pregnancy, and postpartum that if you can just maintain that optimal intake, you're golden.
So what are those benefits?
We discussed it briefly, but basically, you need the bare minimum amount of protein to support your immune function and to prevent malnutrition, bare minimum. But basically, protein is a building block of almost everything in your body: bones, muscles, tissue, everything. It's largely important for women, especially throughout our reproductive years and as we age, because we undergo so many changes with our hormones that affect our bones and our tissues. It's essential for bone health. It provides all the amino acids we need for collagen synthesis, which creates bones. And when you're thinking about pregnancy, you're literally growing bones. So quite necessary. And we'll dive into collagen in a little bit. I always want to touch on that. But so in general, higher protein diets can help reduce appetite, improve satiety, and reduce hunger levels. So this, I always like to tell people, can help with weight management, which can be an important factor in fertility, especially for people dealing with things like PCOS.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of people turn to supplements before looking at something like, hey, have I optimized protein in my diet? And it's so much more simple than trying to buy and stay on top of 5 or 6 different supplements. A lot of my clients with PCOS, the first thing we do is just bump up their protein intake. Protein also helps regulate estrogen and progesterone, which are obviously very important for ovulation and reproductive health in general. And one of the things that I find most interesting, though, is that a low protein diet can actually impair your immune and function and leave you susceptible to infections. Obviously, being sick and being run down, not great for trying to conceive, not great in pregnancies. Keeping that protein high and helping your immune system is great. And then this is one that actually ties into pregnancy that I love is research now suggests that a higher protein diet can improve cardiovascular health, which means blood pressure regulation. And if you actually have high blood pressure when trying to conceive, you can significantly increase your risk of pregnancy complications. So going into pregnancy with high blood pressure puts you at risk for preeclampsia. So interestingly, if you get that protein up prior to trying to conceive, your blood pressure comes down, you are in a much better place going into pregnancy. Is it going to eliminate your risk completely? Of course not. But if that's a factor, it's a very manageable component of your diet that you can control. And then lastly, protein helps your body repair after it's been injured. And birth will likely cause some injuries, whether it's vaginal or C-section. So that's going to be a super important part of postpartum recovery.
Wow, that's so interesting to hear you talk about the bone stuff because, and I've talked about this before with my audience and our community, but back in 2021, I broke my foot in a very embarrassing way. I literally walked on my foot when it was asleep and my bone just cracked. And when I went to the ortho, he came in and looked so concerned, and I thought, oh shit, I'm about to have surgery. Oh my God, this is bad. And he was like, no, I'm not worried about the break at all. The break will heal just fine. Your bone density, honey, is really bad. You have the
Yeah.
bones of a 65-year-old woman. And I was like, oh my God, I'm shook to my core. This is really bad and also very embarrassing. What could be causing this? And he did say, he said, I think probably your protein is not up enough. And he said, how much calcium do you eat? And I do have enough calcium, but he was like, also, how much strength building do you do? If you're not putting weight bearing strength building on your bones, then your bones don't have the resistance to withstand everyday resistance. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh my God. And it just made so much sense. It's just crazy to hear you say that protein is so much connected to your bone health. I think a lot of people don't make that connection because it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like,
We're
okay, I'm
not
eating
taught
this
it.
hamburger. Yeah, I'm eating this steak and it's helping improve my bones.
So many women, I feel, shy away from protein simply because it's almost like a man thing in sports nutrition world, like weightlifting and protein are for men. It's actually so much more important for women because we are at such a higher risk for bone issues just because of our
Wow.
hormones and because we go through menopause. And as we age, again, breaks are going to happen. But yeah, so obviously this kind of crosses over with the fact that I'm also a strength coach and I coach women throughout pregnancy to lift. And yeah, some of the best things you can do for your bone health is eat optimal protein and lift some weights.
Wow. Okay, you guys, so many nuggets in the first like 15 minutes of the episode. I love it. Also, talk to us about your baby's health and well-being connected to protein. If you're not eating enough protein, then we really run the risk of having a small baby or a baby that might not be meeting their weight limits along pregnancy. Is that true?
Yes. And again, I never want to scare people because there are so many factors that go into pregnancy, that go into the growth of a baby. We're talking about one of those factors. But yeah, because it's the building block of everything. It's every structure, every function in the developing baby. Those amino acids, that protein's broken down into amino acids, it builds the baby's muscles, organs, skin, bones, their brain. You'll love this. Adequate protein also supports the placenta's growth and efficiency. So while there are certainly a myriad of factors that go into pregnancy, protein, I feel like, is unfortunately so overlooked. And it's one of those easier things that can be done to improve outcomes.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I get messages online or emails or even clients that come to us and say, I asked my doctor about protein and they just say any amount is good, just get any sort of protein, but they don't really get any solid suggestions. Could you help us understand maybe our best sources of protein and if there are different types of protein we should be prioritizing, especially in pregnancy?
Yes, basically, there's two types of protein. You're going to find your animal sources
Mm.
and your plant sources. That's where protein comes from. Whether we like it or not, studies overwhelmingly conclude that animal sources are the best, most complete sources of protein. That being said, I am totally fine with people taking a plant-based approach. You just have to be a little bit more meticulous about which
Mhm.
foods. You're very intentional, right? Basically, animal protein is what's called a complete protein. So it has all nine essential amino acids that you need. And so plant-based proteins generally are missing like a few of the essential amino acids. That doesn't mean you can't get those from other sources of food. You just have to mix and match more so than eating steak, right? You would have to mix a couple different plant proteins to get the same amino acids that you would from steak. But plant-based proteins absolutely have their place, especially when it comes to like fiber and reducing animal fats in our diet. So I love a mix of both. I think it's fantastic. Obviously, if I have plant-based clients during pregnancy, we just make sure we're getting a nice mix, or we include, which we'll talk about too, but a protein powder, a plant-based protein powder. There are a few plant-based sources of protein that are complete. I always like to mention that. And that's going to be like soy products and quinoa. Those are actually complete proteins. The problem is how much you have to eat, right? How much quinoa would you have to eat to get a proper serving of protein? It's quite a lot. So if you're a volume eater and you want to eat a ton, that's great. If you don't have a huge appetite, eating a lot of quinoa might be hard. So that's where we like to mix and match a little bit or use a protein powder. But you're going to see short, so you've got animal and plant, and then you're going to see different kinds of animal and plant protein pop up. So you're going to have like your caseins and your wheys, and those are all animal-based protein powders. I'm not going to dig into it too much because that's more like super specific nutrition science, but there are just whey and casein digest at different rates. Is it super important in pregnancy? For the general person, probably not. So I always say just pick what you like, pick a taste, a texture that sits well with you, or you can go with a plant-based like pea, soy, hemp. Those are all going to be plant-based. And there's a good variety out there of complete protein powder sources. So if you need something in your diet to help you a little bit, they're out there. And then, of course, you see your collagen protein powders, which I always like to touch on.
Yes, let's dive into this.
I always like to touch on the collagen hype because it's one of the most prevalent ones on social media right now. And I feel like everything being sold as like a miracle cure is somehow collagen right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I always like to tell people that collagen, we produce it naturally. It's the most abundant protein in your body. We actually produce it by combining two different amino acids. So glycine and proline are combined in our body to make collagen. And the best way to do that is actually with the help of vitamin C. So as a side note, whenever I see people mixing their collagen in their coffee, I'm like,
That's me.
no, I know we talked about that. I was like, no, not only is it an incomplete protein, but you're breaking down the protein. So if you
And
wanted,
it's
if you want to do
hot.
collagen, mix it in with your orange juice. That is going to be actually better. So collagen is the primary building block of our bodies, like skin, muscle, bones, tendons, ligaments. Basically, our body takes all those amino acids from the protein and makes collagen. And then it's almost like the glue that holds our body together. That's what I tell people. So it's very important. Collagen in and of itself, super important. But it's worth noting that taking a collagen supplement doesn't actually increase the levels of collagen in your body. It's just going to be broken down like any other protein and used wherever. So because it's an incomplete protein, it lacks the essential amino acids. It might fill in some like gaps in your diet, but if it's between, let's say you're short on cash, because we all are in this economy, and you are deciding between a pricey collagen supplement and a complete protein powder, my recommendation is going to be the complete protein powder because you're going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to get all those essential amino acids. It's going to get broken down and your body's going to make collagen from it anyway. That's where I feel like I'm not sure why there's this hype around collagen right now. I think just like anything, someone saw the amazing stuff it does in our body and they're like, we should basically isolate this and sell it directly. And I'm like, but that's not quite how it works because it's going to get broken down anyways and used however your body wants. So I always tell people, I'm like, taking collagen doesn't increase the levels of collagen in your body. That
Yeah.
simple.
I think that's what happens when you have a bunch of people who don't actually understand the bottom line or don't understand exactly how things work that are out there trying to push different products or trying to be experts in certain fields, but they actually don't have the background that it requires. So I personally think that's why the collagen has become such a hype. I feel like colostrum is the next collagen. Everyone's talking about colostrum. Everyone is using colostrum, and it is just a bandwagon I literally cannot get on.
I feel like we should almost do a whole nother podcast on the colostrum trend because yes, it's something I haven't actually made a post about yet, just because I still have trouble wrapping, I think, my mind around it. But again, people are going to take anything with a nugget of truth and run with it. So, but when it comes to making like affordable, accessible recommendations to my community. Listen, if you can afford a collagen supplement, it's not going to harm you. It might benefit you. It's you're adding amino acids in, so great. But again, if it comes down to I really only want to buy one thing, just get a protein powder. It's got everything collagen has plus more.
What about people who do the collagen supplement and then they say my hair got so much stronger and thicker and my nails started growing like crazy and my eyelashes were so much thicker?
They
Is
probably did.
okay,
It's
so it
because they
really
were
does.
low in protein. Yes. And
Oh,
so, but again, think about the added benefits they might have with anything else if they included like a complete protein. So yeah, they probably were low on protein. They probably were a little bit deficient. And if you start adding in more amino acids, you are going to have beautiful hair and eyelashes and skin. And, but again, if we're talking about good, better, best, go for the best.
totally, which
Get a
is
complete
protein.
protein powder. Yeah.
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 Okay, I have a question about the soy. I know that it's on everyone's mind, getting too much soy, feminizing our boys, causing hormonal problems in women, and a lot of people are it's on their mind. They want
They're
to be
cautious. Yeah.
intentional, yeah, about the soy intake that they have in pregnancy. Talk to us about that, especially for our plant-based people. If soy is one of your primary ways of getting protein, tofu, let's say you're eating a lot of tofu, you're eating a lot of edamame. Is there any truth to the soy conspiracy and what do people need to know about it?
So there isn't. And the first thing I like to point out is Asian cultures. They have a huge amount of soy in their diet. They do not see any increased rate of feminization of men or adverse pregnancy outcomes. The level at which we're ingesting it is just not high enough to create any actual problems. If you're worried about it, pick a different source, but you are going to leave a really good source of protein on the table. But yeah, there's not a lot of great data to back up that widespread myth, if you will. And I love to point out that other cultures use soy much more often than we do daily, multiple meals a day, and they have much better outcomes than we do in the States.
So Surprise, surprise. I feel like everyone has better outcomes than the US.
Yes, yes. So
Out.
again, it does come down to personal preference, though. Obviously, I like to make sure people go in fully informed, as we both do. Here's the data, here's what we know. But if it's still a concern for you, then omit it and just make sure you're getting your complete protein elsewhere.
Yeah. No, I think that brought comfort to a lot of people. I think that scrolling the internet can be so scary. You come across all these things that elicit fear in you, and you automatically think, oh my God, I've been drinking soy milk for the last 4 months of my pregnancy. I'm like so scared I messed up my baby, or I'm so scared I did something wrong. And so I think it's very comforting to hear not only is there not a basis to these claims, but there are ways that you can mitigate these risks, just like mitigating the risk of preeclampsia by just upping your protein intake. It doesn't avoid it for you, but you can absolutely mitigate it, which is all we can ask people to do for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, you have to determine, and this could be a whole separate conversation, but what risks are important to you or not important to you, right? What risks are you willing to take based on how risky they are or whatever? And that's all individual risk assessments, individuals. Again, if you look at the data and you don't feel comfortable with it, then don't drink soy milk. But for the most part, honestly, it's a great source of protein. It's easily tolerated by most people. I say go for it.
And what about people who already have hormonal problems? We've mentioned PCOS. Is there any special considerations with people maybe with PCOS?
I haven't seen anything compelling, I guess I would say. There are always a few little studies that look at small sample sizes. I guess I would say if you are dealing with maybe more of like endocrine issues, it's always worth talking about with your endocrinologist or a dietitian, like a specialized dietitian that works with you, not an internet random person. And you might just trial cutting it out, seeing what your hormones do, seeing if there's any changes. There might not be, which is great. And then you can drink it and not have any issues, or maybe you cut it out and stuff changes. So again, I always like to say I don't like to make blanket recommendations, especially when the data we have is not solid.
Yeah.
Yes.
Individualized care is the way to get your best
Mhm.
outcomes, and we
Yes.
know that.
Yes.
What sucks is that it's so hard to find that individualized care because everything on the internet pretty much is a blanket statement. It's like collagen
Mhm.
is great,
Yep.
colostrum is great.
Soy.
Exactly. And I think something that I love so much about you because it feels so aligned to me is ask questions about your pregnancy, ask questions about your body, ask questions to somebody who knows you, knows your history, knows your goals. Stop getting information like generalized information. You are going to feel better, you're going to feel more confident, and you're going to have better outcomes.
Oh, 100%. I'll say, obviously, this is not medical advice because this is just me working with my clients one-on-one. But I will say, when I have clients or members with PCOS or endometriosis, endocrine issues, the first thing we do, like I said previously, is look at their diet overall and actually bump up their protein. I would do that way before recommending like cutting out soy. You know what I mean? Bump up this protein and let's see how you feel or how your cycles regulate or if you're pregnant in a few months. And usually we get there.
It's so funny to hear you say regulate your cycles. So I've been working with my practitioners to regulate my cycles. I was having a little longer cycles and I was having cycles that at the beginning of my period, it was dark brown blood and we upped my protein. I started to intentionally sweat. So more than just moving my body, because when I go to the gym, I'm not doing like really intense cardio where it is eliciting me to sweat. And so I actually invested in a sauna mat and I started to intentionally sweat. My periods regulated like crazy. They just got so regular. I started having bright red blood in the beginning, and I was mind blown. And it also, I think, blew my mind because those were things I would have never come across myself. It did take
Mhm.
me having an intentional conversation, looking at my health history, looking at what my goals were for my practitioners. And I have a couple of them that are working together, which is also so nice. I'm so lucky and privileged to have that. They really put together an individualized care plan for me, and it worked.
That's what's tough is and we've all done it. I'm a mom. I've Googled pregnant and I specialize in it and I still have Googled it, right? Because you don't know what's normal, you don't know what's right, what's wrong. And then you start looking on social media and there's all these conflicting opinions, advice. Nothing's really tailored to you. You try to patch it together. You don't really know though, and you might most people end up fine, but you might end up spending a bunch of money on meaningless supplements, useless garbage. You might do all these different things that cause stress, and stress is going to be way worse for trying to conceive a pregnancy than drinking soy. So it's so tough because that's what I tell people. I'm like, listen, There are so many things like when people Google, like, what should I do for trying to conceive or what should I do for pregnancy? How do I get healthy? There's always these like daunting lists of all these nitty gritty, throw away all your candles. You know what I mean? Is there a time and place for talking about endocrine disruptors? Sure. But why are we skipping the basics of move your body, lift some weights,
Eat
bump
protein.
up your calories, eat your protein, lower your stress, and fucking sleep? Like those are cut alcohol. Like why are we doing all these other things as opposed to cutting alcohol, right? It's just it's so hard when a lot of the issues I feel could be solved using these more simple things than going down the whole list of we've all seen the list of everything you're supposed to throw away in your house because they disrupt your hormones. Is there some truth to it? Possibly, and maybe get there, but start with the basics.
Yeah. Okay, you touched on an interesting point, and this is not protein related at all, but what are your suggestions? Look, you're a healthcare professional. I work overnights as a doula. We're both very accustomed to missing sleep, having kind of erratic sleep schedules. How do you suggest someone in the healthcare field or a doula or an emergency provider, anybody who, any shift worker who is missing out on sleep and does not have, truly doesn't have the ability to sleep 8 to 10 hours every single night, have a routine bedtime, have a routine time to wake up? How do they go about implementing small changes to maybe get that sleep a little bit more regular with the schedule that they have?
This one is really tough because at the end of the day, constantly working in odds to your circadian rhythm is going to negatively impact your health. Like it just is what it is. There are certainly ways to mitigate how bad it is. I actually have an entire post for shift workers inside my membership, especially for nurses. And a lot of it is you have to be so intentional with like your schedule outside of your like your set job at night. It's like truly setting up your home and your life where you can go home, don't drink caffeine, eat a good meal. That morning time is like your bedtime routine. You do need to get at least 6 hours of sleep, get blackout curtains, get a face mask, earplugs, whatever you need to do, and then be intentional about waking up, getting in a workout, eating your high protein meals. And that's not always easy or realistic. And at some point, that's what's so tough about shift work. And I say that as someone in the nursing field who gets that unfortunately people need to be working at night. You can't just not get sick at night or not have babies at night. It's going to
Or
happen.
not have a hospital
Yeah.
running at night. Like,
Yeah.
it's
So
impossible.
it's one of those just unfortunate things. And I have found that some, and it's again, everyone's different, genetics are different. Some people do fine. Some people work nights and they don't really see any adverse health outcomes. I can tell you if I worked nights, I would fall apart. I have several autoimmune conditions. I know I need to prioritize sleep at the appropriate times. That's not really an option for me unless I wanted to sacrifice my health. So it is tough. And we've all been there. I have a 3-year-old, so I went through the newborn sleep deprivation and it wasn't great. You struggle for a little bit. And I would say if you have that community built up, obviously you being the doula, you are the community. Unfortunately, you're the one staying up. But so many moms are like shamed for asking for help. But it's, do you want me to rest and recover and be healthy enough to take care of my kid? Or do you want me to forego my village and sacrifice my health because society said so? It's so tough. I will say having your village and being able to limit the night waking. And I actually have a whole conversation about pre-prepping meals, high protein meals. So you're ready to go before you even give birth. Make sure your freezer is stocked. Make sure you have quick and easy protein meals that you can just heat up so you're not in the middle of the night dead to the world, feel malnourished. But yeah, it's tough. That's tough because fighting your circadian rhythm is going to negatively impact you long term.
Yeah. Look,
There's no way around
I have
it.
MCAS, which is mast cell activation
Yeah.
syndrome for anybody who is not familiar. And I have never had as many MCAS episodes, and mine include full body rashes and anaphylaxis, and they are quick onset, as I have when I was working 5 nights a week of overnights. My hair was falling out, my skin was literally falling off my body. My mental health was suffering so bad, and it ultimately pushed me to change my business a little bit to better support my personal life, which I dealt with a lot of guilt over because it's like what you said, I'm the village. I should be able to show up for these people. But then I realized if I'm dead, I can't show up for anybody. So
No.
it was just really important for me to make that shift to say, okay, I'm going to shift this so that I can be healthy. So for the people that I do show up for, I can show up 100%. I can show up healthy to help them also be healthier in their life. And that's really important. So if you're out there listening and you're really struggling with the shift work and you've been feeling that nag or that push or that pull to do something about your overnight shift work, this is your permission to say, like, it's okay if you feel like you're letting your patients down or your coworkers down or whatever system you work for. It is okay to prioritize yourself because you can't show up for your patients and your clients and your system and your coworkers if you're unhealthy, and you deserve to be healthy, and we love you and we want you to be healthy. So prioritize yourself.
I never want to scare new moms either because I want to be realistic. There is sleep deprivation and it is hard. But the nice part about that is it is a phase and it will pass. And I say that as someone who had, I don't like using the word bad sleeper, but I had an exceptionally difficult time. My 3-year-old did not sleep through the night until he was 2. I say that as someone who has been through the trenches. Like it ends. And that's different. Like when you're choosing a shift work position that could go on for years or decades. So I do want to say that it is short in the overall span of your life, being a postpartum new mom. It's probably not going to negatively impact you long term, hopefully. And that's where building your village, though, and planning ahead matters. And we could go into a whole conversation about postpartum care in the United States, but that's a problem for a different day.
It is, and something that's not going to be fixed on a single podcast episode.
No.
I remember following your sleep saga on Instagram, and it just, my heart went out to you. But you're right, it's temporary, it's a phase. Eventually, your baby will sleep again, and it's hard in that moment. But if you can hold on to the hope of, like, all right, better days are coming, more sleep is coming, it makes it a tad bit easier.
That's one of those things where you prioritize what you can. So perhaps you can't fix sleep in that moment, but you can have high protein meals on hand. You can drink a lot of water. You can try to reduce stressors in other ways by pre-planning for if you're taking time off work or if your partner's going to help you or if you're going to have a nanny or a doula or whatever it might look like, or if grandma's going to come live with you. Sure, sleep might suffer, but focus on what you can control, what factors you can control. And that's obviously where protein ties in. If you can control getting really great, nourishing, high protein meals, do it. Sleep will come. But in the meantime, if you can get enough nutrients in your body, you can mitigate some of that stress.
That's what I was going to say. It goes back to that mitigation factor of this may be out of our control right now, but what do we have in our control that can
Mhm.
mitigate those things? Okay, one thing that you have touched on several times is supplements. And
Yes.
supplements, as we know in the US, are unregulated. They are not passed through anyone really to make sure that they include the things that they say they include, don't have a bunch of harmful fillers, actually are coming from the companies that say that they're selling them. Talk to us about supplements and how we can be educated, informed consumers about or when it comes to supplements, and also where do we get our supplements? Because I think a lot of people are going to Amazon, and I think more data is coming out every day about the harmful effects of things that are found on Amazon just not being honest products.
Yes. Like you said, the supplement industry is definitely the Wild West. There's no federal oversight, so it can be extremely dangerous. So what I tell my pregnant patients is protein powder is an absolute yes. You can take protein powder. Protein powder in and of itself is fantastic. The problem is you need to find reputable brands that go above and beyond to protect their consumers. So that looks like third-party testing and full transparency about what's in their products. So what we want is during the trying to conceive pregnancy and postpartum periods, we know that getting enough protein on any day not being pregnant is hard, but doing it when you're trying to conceive and pregnant and postpartum is even harder. So I always tell my patients, my clients, my members to have a protein powder or a protein shake or a pre-made shake, whatever that they love on hand. So you want it to be a reputable brand. So something that's well known, not some weird little thing you found on Amazon, right? Third party tested. Generally speaking, there are other third party testing companies, but basically you want it to be NSF International Consumer Lab or USP. Those are going to be the three that are most well known, that do a lot of the third party testing, very reputable, very trustworthy. So you don't want any like herbal blends or proprietary blends or fillers. We see those a lot. They're not tested for safety or purity. They're definitely not tested for safety in pregnancy because barely anything is tested for safety in pregnancy. Those are definitely not. And even if they are safe, they're generally not in amounts that make any meaningful impact, if we're being honest. So you're just wasting your money. So basically, you want protein. You want protein. There is definitely a conversation in terms of like artificial sweeteners, colors. Honestly, again, I'm more focused on big picture. If those things matter to you, choose a protein without them. We don't have any great evidence that shows that the amounts in the protein powder would be cause for any health concerns with you or your child. But again, personal preference. There are plenty of quote clean brands that don't have colors or additives, and that's great. I'm glad that's available for people. So whatever is best for you, your preferences, your morals, your ethics, whether it be animal or plant or clean or whatever, as long as it is third-party tested, reputable brand, I am happy. I feel good recommending those to my pregnant patients and clients. I know you partner with Just Ingredients. I checked out theirs, looks great, third-party tested. Some other great ones are like Naked Nutrition, Optimum Nutrition, Premier Protein, Clean and Simple. I think it's like Organ Organics for plant-based options. There are a few really great ones out there. So I know people are always really stressed out about supplements in pregnancy, rightfully. And unfortunately, OBs don't get nutrition training, so they usually default to don't take it. But then again, you're leaving these people high and dry when it comes to how do we meet our protein intake if we're vomiting all day and can only eat bread. I would love to say, hey, you can drink a protein shake. You're fine. It's safe. It's going to do a lot more good than any theoretical harm.
Okay, and how do we know if something is third party tested? In my brain, it should be clearly labeled on their website. They should be very transparent about it. How do we ensure that we are getting that transparent communication from the brands that we're using?
So if you go straight to the brand website, if you scroll to the bottom, they will always have like third-party testing as like one of the links in the footnotes. You can click on it. They'll either have that like NSF, Consumer Lab, or USP like label on their packaging. A lot of them want to promote that they're third-party tested because it makes them a reputable product. And here's what I say. If you go to their webpage and it takes you a lot of digging to find it. Or if you're on Amazon looking at a supplement and you don't find it anywhere easily, I would say pass.
Mm.
Sounds shady to me.
Mm.
Usually brands want to say, hey, we're third party tested. You can trust us.
Yeah, it builds their reputation, right? It's something
Mhm.
to be proud of that you can get third party tested and be proven as a clean, trustworthy brand.
Get your stamp of approval because the third party testing companies aren't just going to stamp everything. Their reputation would be at risk too. You want to see that NSF, Consumer Lab, USP, third party testing. I actually went to a couple different of the protein powder websites just to see while I was doing my research for the show, and almost all of it was very prominent on the website. So it's easy to find usually.
Yeah. Is there anything that we need to be aware of as consumers in terms of money passing hands or any sort of back end workings of the third party testing? Or is it pretty much like independent? You send your sample in, they test it, you either pass or you fail.
So yeah, obviously we never know 100% if there's any corruption in anything, but for the most part, these, like I keep saying, the NSF, Consumer Lab, and USP are highly trustworthy, independent associations that do third-party testing. They don't want their reputation at risk. Generally speaking, the brands will send in samples, and honestly, if they get docked, they're going to want to fix it because they don't want the
To
public
know
knowing
about
that
it.
it's a crappy brand. Obviously, I haven't looked into that extensively, and now I want to just because you said it, but I feel comfortable with those third-party testing organizations.
Yeah, it's like a little watchdog. Okay, I'd like to transition to trying to conceive just because that's where I am in my life. So, talk to us a little bit about why protein is so important for trying to conceive, egg quality, helping us to conceive, maybe making your body a little bit more susceptible to pregnancy, able to hang on to a pregnancy once you get pregnant. What do we need to know about that?
As I like to say before all of this, there are so many factors that go into conception. I just want to remind everyone we're talking about one, but protein is super important. Amino acids are the building blocks for every single healthy cell, and that includes egg and sperm. So, adequate protein is going to support the growth and repair of cells in the ovaries and uterus as well. So, it can support endometrial development, which is the lining in your uterus. That could theoretically create a more favorable environment for implantation, especially if you're pulling in like the hormone regulation from an optimal protein diet. That all balances out everything really great, creates that optimal house for an egg. We also discussed a little bit briefly how protein helps regulate insulin and blood sugar. And so when you're doing that, you're reducing inflammation, you're supporting optimal hormone production for regular cycles. I cannot tell you the amount of people, you in there, that have done something simple like increase their protein intake and all of a sudden their cycles are regular. I'm like, that's all you needed. It's great. I love it. You didn't need like all these crazy like supplements or procedures or practitioners or whatever. Just increase your protein. I hate doing like the miracle thing, but for me, the miracle drug in my world is protein. It can fix so much, and especially when it comes to conception and pregnancy, because those amino acids are like little building blocks for all healthy cells. That includes sperm. I
Yeah.
love talking about male factor because I feel like women really bear the brunt for fertility. And I love mentioning that male factor accounts for 50% of infertility cases because I feel like men need to be held accountable. So I know some people always ask about like sperm health or what their partner's diet should look like, and they need to be held accountable and they need to increase their protein too. We actually do know that sufficient intake of protein is necessary for proper sperm development and function. If they're lacking in protein, their sperm may not have great motility or something. Who knows? Can diet fix all sperm issues or all fertility issues? Of course not. But it is a huge factor that I feel like, again, is just overlooked. And then I always like to mention that because some people don't know, but it takes 90 days for the egg to mature and get pulled from your reserves to then ovulate. So in those 3 months prior to the ovulation where you could theoretically conceive, you are affecting that egg quality and outcome with your diet, with your exercise, if you're smoking, if you're drinking, if you're stressed, all of that plays into egg and sperm quality.
Okay, and what about people who don't get enough protein? Are we seeing problems with that?
Yeah, so like you said, if you're not getting enough protein and your cycles are irregular, you're probably going to have a harder time trying to conceive. Is it impossible? Of course not, but it's not going to be, if you're not having regular cycles, it's going to be a lot more difficult to time when you're ovulating, time when you should have sex. You're probably going to end up trying for a long time before you're finally recommended to like a specialist, right? So low protein intake obviously can impact your hormones. What's actually really interesting is protein deficiency can reduce luteinizing hormone, which means you're not getting that spike, which drives ovulation.
Wow.
Um,
So does that
so
lead to anovulation where you may not
yes.
even ovulate at all?
Yes, so you could have ovulatory cycles where you're not pushing out an egg, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people get frustrated there and then end up in IVF. And again, I'm not broad brushing. Fertility treatments are absolutely necessary in some cases, but what if you weren't ovulating simply because your diet was lacking? Like,
Really?
fix those small things first and just see and then go from there. The last thing I found really interesting when I was doing kind of my research on protein and hormones is that protein may also help regulate cortisol. So chronic stress paired with inadequate protein intake could also interfere with ovulation. So there's all these things where I'm just like, let's fix your diet and see if we can get you ovulating and see if we can get you to have regular cycles and get you pregnant.
I just
And
think about all the heartache that people might be able to avoid if they just focused on protein. And again, same thing. I'm not dismissing IVF. It's absolutely imperative for some families, but what if is always in my mind. What if we just upped your protein and then you could avoid IVF altogether? And it makes so much sense that it regulates your cortisol because it goes back to protein is essential for healing. If your body is in this state of stress and stressed out all the time, you've got all this inflammation and you're not getting enough protein, now you're just in this nasty cycle of high cortisol all the time. No matter how much water you drink, no matter how much sleep you're getting, you are just stuck in this cycle of we're stressed.
well, it's always tough too because once people get to the point where they're looking at fertility treatments, they're all of a sudden overhauling their entire life, right? They're changing their whole diet, they're changing their exercise, they're throwing everything out in their house that could be an endocrine disruptor. They're going through these treatments, and when they ultimately end up pregnant, it's like it's hard to know what it was, right? So it's if you just take a second, maybe focus on the more simple things like change up your diet a little bit, increase your protein, reduce stressors, try to get some sleep. And I'm not saying do this forever. Give it like a couple months. Obviously, timeline is important when we're talking about pregnancy and fertility treatments, but it's you could possibly avoid like 20, 30, 40, $50,000 worth of something that may have not been necessary.
Wow, with just a simple tweak of getting enough protein every day. That's
And I
crazy.
know it's tough because I do obviously network with a lot of fertility specialists, and they are definitely coming from a place where they want to get you pregnant as fast as possible. That is their job, that is their goal, and we love them for that. So it is hard to say, hey, let's take a second and look at this holistically. And I hate using that word because I feel like it's almost been changed from what it means, but just full body, right? Yeah, it's not like weird or wooey. It's just let's make sure we're looking at the whole picture. Let's make sure we're looking at like your diet, your exercise, your sleep, especially if it can save someone money and time and like
Right.
heartbreak. Fertility treatments are not easy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And look, I get it. Not everybody is going to be willing to wait that 90 days. Some people want a baby faster than that, and I support you in that decision. But if you have that time to take that 90 days, 120 days, 150 days to get your protein up, why not start there?
And
And
short of pregnancy, there are so many other benefits. So do it regardless. Your hair is going to look gorgeous.
yeah.
I want gorgeous hair.
Who doesn't want that? You gotta look gorgeous when you go in for your treatments or when you go in.
And your bones won't break and it's going to be fantastic. That's what I always tell people. I'm like, before you even get to pregnancy talks, that's why you should already be optimizing your protein intake. There's far too many reasons. There's far too many reasons to do it short of pregnancy. I work with women who are child free by choice and we're optimizing their protein because they want to age without breaking their hip. Eat your protein.
Do you think eating enough protein will help prevent wrinkles?
If it boosts collagen production in your body, theoretically, you can only really do so much. But yeah.
I gotta get my protein up. I feel like I'm getting wrinkles already, and I don't even have babies yet. Okay, so in terms of protein intake in pregnancy, we covered that. Is it the same when you're trying to conceive? Do we need more? Do we need less? Is it based on our weight and age again? What do we need to know about that?
So listen, if we want to get super nitty-gritty nutritional science, sure. But again, I like to keep it a little more broad picture because there are so many stressors. We don't need to add another stressor. I'm trying to nail this down to the gram. So as a baseline, I want everyone to take their weight in kilograms and multiply it by 1.4 to 2. And that is your range.
Hmm.
And throughout pregnancy or trying to conceive pregnancy, just aim to fall within that range and you are in a really great spot. Technically speaking, and this is actually usually a relief for people to hear, protein is slightly less important in the first trimester, which is great because you're usually like throwing up and you can't eat. Protein is disgusting. Like meat is one of the highest pregnancy aversions, right? The second and third trimester is going to be a lot more important. I don't want to negate it. You still need protein in your first trimester, but second and third is where baby is like really accelerating in terms of like bone and organ growth. So that thankfully corresponds with when you start feeling better and can eat protein again. And what's interesting is so many women around that time, around that second trimester time, start like really craving deli sandwiches, even though they've maybe never loved deli sandwiches previously. So we do see that's almost like your body knows it's give us this protein. Or like vegetarians all of a sudden, I always laugh at Friends, right? Phoebe, where she like needs steak during pregnancy. Your body knows it's give it to me.
That's so funny. Okay, and what about people who don't eat red meat? How are they getting in protein in these times? Same thing as the soy before that we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, there's people forget that there's so many ways to get protein. You just have to be slightly intentional about it, which is why so many people outside of pregnancy even struggle with protein because you do have to be intentional. You can opt if you don't eat red meat, and if you are eating red meat, I always say opt for lean because you do want to be mindful of dietary fats. But there's
Okay.
turkey, there's chicken. Even in pregnancy, you can do low mercury fish like salmon, fantastic for pregnancy. There's Greek yogurt, eggs, cottage cheese. And then if you're looking at like plant-based stuff, there's tofu, there's lentils, there's edamame, there's beans, there's quinoa. And then, of course, if you're really struggling, protein powder, protein shakes. Do it. get your protein in. That's better than not getting it at all. You can literally go on Google and Google like highest protein foods, and it's going to give you an amazing list. And just pick ones you love and try to get them in at every meal and every snack. That's what's hard though, is I always tell my clients protein is the most intentional macronutrient. Like you actually have to think about it. I mean, after a while, it becomes second nature. You know how to just build your meals around a protein. But when you first start, it's usually eye-opening, especially when you're trying to meet that range, um, how little you're getting and how challenging it can be to find it.
Yeah. Okay. So for people who are not weighing out their protein, we've already talked about a little bit about the deficiency and how it's connected to fetal growth restriction and it's connected to preeclampsia and it's connected to possibly worse outcomes for you and your baby. How would you determine if you are protein deficient if you don't necessarily know or think that you are? What kind of signs and symptoms are we looking for from our bodies to say, hey, I need a little bit more protein?
I actually love this because so not many of us are going to be so severely like deficient that we're going to need medical attention, right? Like most of us are going to be in that like mild deficiency range where we're going to have symptoms like hair loss or your skin is going to look dull or dry or wrinkly or you're going to have nail problems where they like crack and break and peel, right? You're going to be tired. You're actually going to have an insatiable appetite because protein is highly satiating. So you're probably going to be eating a lot more carbs and fats than you generally would otherwise. You're going to have slow healing injuries. You might be slightly anemic. You might have poor immune function. You might be getting sick a lot. You might have issues with reproductive health like PCOS or fertility problems. So it's interesting. It's like my goal is never to scare people. You're probably not severely protein deficient, but even mild deficiency, you're going to see symptoms and you're going to see problems.
Wow, that's, I don't even know the word. Comforting to know what to look for, comforting to know that it is an easy tweak, but a little concerning that we're not learning this in, let's say, high school. That
No,
would be helpful if we could learn it as young adults, how
no.
important protein is and why it's so essential to our health.
The only thing we learn is that Americans are eating too much protein based on the RDA, and that's absolutely not true. If we're comparing to the RDA, sure, we're probably eating slightly too much because you get 60 grams when they recommend 55. But when you learn that the RDA is the bare minimum, not nearly optimal, it's interesting because I didn't learn this either, right? I actually got really into the fitness competition and bodybuilding world after college, and then I got certifications in sports nutrition. And that is when I started learning all this. And thankfully, I was still young enough, in my early 20s to make impactful changes. But it's so distressing to see women not learning about this until pregnancy or menopause or when they break a hip when they're 70. Like, huge disservice to women. We need protein. It's not for men. I would argue that it's more impactful for women.
Yeah, are we surprised that women aren't getting the information about their health? I love that we both laugh so we don't cry. I'm not
So
surprised at all.
that's one of the biggest hurdles I overcome with like new clients in the fitness and nutrition world is like convincing women that protein is for them. There are like a myriad of reasons why it is important for them. And then pairing that, which is a conversation for a different day, but pairing that with strength training, like getting past these barriers because society has basically told us that like protein and strength training is for men. It's doing us a huge disservice. We need protein. We need strength training.
Yeah, look, I second that, you guys. I am far from an expert in this, but I will tell you, it scared the bejesus out of me when that ortho told me that he was so concerned about my bone health. I have done the work to improve that. I always have plenty of space to grow and do more, but I can tell you I've seen the benefits of it. So take it from a non-expert, just a regular best friend. Your protein intake and strength building are so easy to incorporate into your daily routines, and it does actually make such a big difference.
Well, I'll give you the opposite end of the spectrum. I do DEXA scans for my body composition because of my history with bodybuilding and powerlifting and whatever. And I have always had above average bone density because of my protein intake and my resistance training.
Explain to us what a DEXA scan is.
So it's a scan that essentially was used medically to measure bone density, but for body composition purposes, it actually looks at your lean mass versus fat mass. So it's very helpful. It's very helpful. Honestly, athletes use it a lot because they want to know how much lean mass they have, muscle, how much body fat they're carrying, and where. It'll actually show you specifically on your body what is fat and what is muscle. You're probably not going to get it from your regular old physician. They will generally order them for women who are going through menopause to assess bone density, but unfortunately at that point it is too late.
Oh, no.
If it's affordable for you, you can usually just Google DEXAs, DEXA in your area. And a lot of universities will carry them because they use them for testing. Some athletic facilities will carry them. And usually they're, and I say affordable loosely because I know everyone's financial situation is differently, but usually for the 100 or 150 bucks, you can get a DEXA scan without an order from a physician. And I always think it's worthwhile at least once in like your 20s and 30s. So you can get a baseline, like you said, of like where your bone density is and if you need to make improvements, because once you hit menopause and beyond, it's going to be hard to recover. Is it impossible? No, you can always make changes, but you really want to be adding to your muscle mass and bone density early in life because as women, unfortunately, with our hormones, as estrogen declines, our bone density also declines. It's worthwhile to do. I think it's really fun. And if you're interested in like your body composition, where your muscle mass is, where your fat mass is, that's cool to see too.
Yeah, it just gives you that whole body scan of like, how am I doing? What improvements can I make? Am I doing all the right things? And then once you implement that, I'm thinking for myself, maybe I should go get one,
Yes.
see how that compares to what I was in 2021 and see what kind of work I could still be doing to improve things. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so when it comes to recovery, you hinted at it that we need protein in recovery and birth, obviously, whether you have a vaginal or a cesarean birth you are going to have a recovery. And they look different, obviously, depending on how you have your baby. Talk to us about what we need to know about protein intake in postpartum. And if you could give us some suggestions on maybe some quick and easy grab and go one-handed snacks or meals that would be easy for moms who are breastfeeding, always have a baby on their hip, trying to take care of all the household stuff because their partner only had a week of paternity leave or whatever it might be.
Yep. Yeah. So, like we keep talking about amino acids, building block of everything in your body. So, with labor and delivery, you're going to have internal wounds regardless. That placenta is going to detach. You're going to have a big wound. You might have some tearing. If you had a C-section, you're going to have multiple layers of incisions. You need enough protein to recover. Injury, recovery, wound healing all require amino acids, actually at a little bit of a higher level. So, that's what I always tell my clients too who aren't even pregnant but get injured. They're always like, should I bring down my calories because I'm not training as hard? I'm like, sure, but you better keep that protein high because your body needs it to recover. It's going to help repair that tissue. It's actually going to keep your energy levels up. It's going to balance your blood sugar. It's going to improve your energy. Like I said, it also provides the necessary aminos for breast milk, which is always interesting. I love that. And then it's also going to support your immune system during this like super vulnerable time where you are likely a bit nutrient depleted because baby's been pulling from your stores, you're sleep deprived, those all affect your immune function and you are super vulnerable to getting sick. Increasing your protein is a really easy way to help mitigate. Again, we can only do so much, but it's going to help. So I always tell people, again, we're not going to stress out on certain numbers or anything, just multiply your weight by that 1.4 and 2 in kilograms and just fall within that range. And then in terms of and I say this as a mom who went through it. I had severe PPA. I know I was not hitting my protein goals. And if or when we have a second, I would do so many things differently. I would stock up on pre-prepped proteins like rotisserie chickens, right? Like you can shred chicken, put it in a bag, and put it in your freezer.
Wow.
Done. Even things like canned tuna, salmon, and chicken. Obviously, I know some people have concerns with cans, but again, overall, if you're looking at not getting protein versus getting protein from a can, get your protein from a can. So even simple things though, like you can do, I've seen so many people now, it's so cute. They have what's called nesting parties and their friends come over and they do make ahead freezer friendly meals like crock pot soups, egg bites that they put in like muffin tins and then freeze, protein waffles. You can make those and then stick them in the freezer. And then always just have like protein bars and shakes on hand. And then I actually have a protein ball recipe that I give that's great because you can eat those one-handed, right? So those are all really great options. I think if I was to do it again, I would definitely have more make ahead freezer-friendly options and then make sure I have enough. I really pre-made protein shakes. I don't even want to have to shake up powder. It needs to be easier than that. It needs to be made for me already. So just having pre-made protein shakes that were ready to go would have been so much easier.
Do you have a favorite brand that is not? So my problem with protein shakes that are already pre-made, they're a lot of times gritty and I'm not even a texture person, but it makes me gag. So are there any good brands, on the market that you love, they're clean, they're trustworthy and are palatable?
So I will say I personally drink the Optimum Nutrition pre-made protein shakes. I trust them because they're reputable, they're third party tested. I will say if your personal vibe is more like clean, no artificial flavors, no artificial colors, they're probably not for you. For me, that doesn't bother me as much, but they are great. They taste great. The texture is great. And I have had a few that were gritty to the point where I actually put them through a strainer because I was like, I can't drink this, but I don't want to throw it away. I would not recommend that because that's more work. But the Optimum Protein and Premier Protein pre-made shakes are pretty good. I do know a lot of my clients like I think it's like the plant-based one that like OWYN or something. They have a pre-made one that's plant-based. Plant-based can be gritty though, but most of my clients like that one. So I will say it is nice to have just pre-made on hand. Or if you want to use your super clean protein powder, shake it up in like a pitcher and
Mhm.
just have it in the fridge ready to go.
Yeah, just like you would batch make your formula, you guys, you
Yes,
can batch
exactly.
your protein shakes for that day or the next like 24 hours. Okay, I have a question about postpartum bleeding and protein. Someone who is deficient in protein or is not getting enough protein, or let's say they're not getting that optimal amount of protein, are we more at risk for postpartum hemorrhage? Because in my brain, that makes sense, but what's the data say?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I would have to look that up. We might have to like check it and throw it in the show notes. I don't know if I've actually specifically looked at because I think it would have to do with are you truly anemic or not, right?
Iron,
Yeah.
right? Is that if
Yeah.
you don't get enough protein, you're more likely to be iron deficient, which is
Yeah.
going to lead to possibly more bleeding, which
Yeah.
possibly,
I would say let's see if we can pull some data. I don't know if it's there
yeah.
because we don't really study women and we don't really study pregnancy. We could make the logical assumption that if you're protein deficient and you're iron deficient, you would definitely run into issues.
Yeah, that makes so much sense in my brain. Okay, for postpartum and breastfeeding people, do we need to up our protein or still that same 1.4 to 2 range that kind of we're doing all along?
Yeah, you can. Again, it's based on person, but I would say fall in that range. You're definitely going to need to increase your calories, but as long as you're falling within that range, you're getting enough. Maybe aim for the higher end of the range, so aim for 2 grams per kilogram. Again, it's going to be hard and you're going to have to be intentional though, because a lot of people aren't used to meeting that level of protein. So that's why I always say before you even get pregnant, get used to eating optimal protein because then it becomes second nature and it's not nearly as difficult.
Yeah, once you learn how to do it, it's a skill that's in your back pocket forever.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And you're going into it. It's not like you can really like store protein the same way you can store like a fat soluble vitamin, but you're already going into it in a really healthy, optimized place so that if you do run into a wall where you're just like, I can't do this anymore, you're not like malnourished. You're not already deficient. You're already in a great place. You have some wiggle room to be like, I'm not being optimal in my protein intake right now, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah. So another random question that dropped into my head. If someone had sperm or egg testing and it came back that their egg quality and their sperm quality were less than desired, maybe not even poor, but just less than what they had hoped for, a great place to start would be just upping your protein. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Yeah, and you're going to see a lot of REIs, so fertility specialists, and just other people out in the world who specialize in fertility nutrition. The first thing they're going to look at is your overall calorie consumption, your proteins, like where your dietary fats are coming. They're probably going to get more nitty-gritty than I would personally get. But yeah, a good start would be to optimize your protein intake because I'm going to go ahead and say that most people are not getting enough.
Yeah. So would
They're
it
also going to recommend things like reduce your alcohol intake and all the other factors that go into it. But in terms of nutrition, it can get I struggle with fertility nutrition sometimes because I feel like sometimes it's the recommendations stress you out a little bit more than
Yeah.
necessary and make too many changes that probably aren't necessary. So I definitely come in at it from a point of let's do, let's just look at your calories, let's look at your protein, let's start there, let's give it a little bit, and then we can get more nitty-gritty if needed. Because when you give somebody a list of 20, 15 things they have to change, that's overwhelming and they're more likely to fail. If you just say, hey, eat more protein, it's a little bit easier, more manageable.
Yeah, I always like to describe this, especially in pregnancy, because as you get closer to your due date, it's do this and do the mile circuit and meditate and do your journaling and visualize your pregnancy
Now
and
I'm stressed
don't break
out.
work out and don't do all this. I always tell people do what feels good to you
Mhm.
without increasing your cortisol. The minute that you swap over to, oh shit, this is stressing me out, we are negating all of the positive benefits that's coming from the changes that you are making. So we want to walk a fine balance of making small incremental changes that feel good to you, feel manageable to you, but are not spiking that cortisol because, like you said earlier, stress is one of the number one worst things that we can have in pregnancy. It harms you, it harms your baby, it harms your outcomes. It's just no good. So if you're adding stress to your life, we've got to back it up. We have to back it up and we have to figure out something that's more manageable.
100%. And that's what people don't realize is stress is not talked about enough, I don't think. If there was one thing I would say that probably has the most harmful impact on women in pregnancy and their babies, it's going to be stress.
Mm.
And nobody really thinks about that. And they do all of these things. They get so stressed out trying to conceive, going through pregnancy. And I'm not going to say it's not stressful, it is. But as opposed to looking at something like, is your candle affecting your ability to conceive? Look at your stress levels. That is going to make a much bigger impact. If the candle's stressing you the fuck out, then throw it away. But stress, and then again, simple things like we've talked about this whole time. And when I say look at your diet, I don't mean throw away everything in your house and only buy clean organic foods. That is not what we're going for here. I'm saying like make sure you're getting enough calories, make sure you're getting enough protein, maybe swap some of your hyper processed snacks for some less processed snacks. You know what I mean? Like we're talking small changes here. Maybe start strength training 3 times a week. Like you don't need to go into this full overhaul of your entire life to the point where you're so stressed out that your cortisol levels are perpetually high and you're never going to ovulate ever again.
Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh. And I feel like stress is so hard to get away from, especially as Americans, and then doubly especially as women, and then triply especially as a woman who is on the reproductive journey from the legislation that is happening in our country to always being overworked to just simply the mental load of trying to build your family. Stress can be one of those things where you feel like I can't get away from this tiger that's chasing me.
Yep. And unfortunately, that's a whole different conversation on what are your stressors? What can you do to reduce them? Or how can you learn to cope with them better? And I think we're all still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, fingers crossed, you guys, that help is
But the
on.
good news is eating protein is well within your control
It
and
is.
fairly easy.
And it'll help that stuff, right? It'll help the
Mhm.
cortisol. It'll help you feel healthier. It'll help the fatigue. It'll help you sleep better. It will help you in the long run if you just increase your protein. I knew when I started to look into protein in pregnancy and how important it was. You were the first person that came to my mind because of all that I've learned from you from your Instagram. And I knew instantly, I was like, I have to have Amanda on the show. She is like the go-to gal for this. And I thought that it was just a conversation that not a lot of people are having, but it's one that is really imperative to have a healthy pregnancy. And so I'm just really grateful that you have joined us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm always excited when I get to do a deep dive on like nerdy science stuff like nutrition because there are a lot of people who cover nutrition in pregnancy, but I feel like it's like a broad overview. So when you get to really deep dive into like protein or like a dietary fat or something, it's really fun, especially because we don't learn it.
Yeah, I'm always here to nerd out. I'm like one of the biggest nerds in the whole world. I love to deep dive. So truly, thank you so much. If someone was wanting to work with you, learn more, join some of your programs, how do they connect with you and where do they find these things?
So you're primarily going to find me on Instagram right now as we work through which social media platforms are aligned with our values. It's Amanda Howell Health. So you're going to find me there. And then I actually run a little academy called Pregnancy Academy. So it's a comprehensive course, and we're talking like a deep dive into reproductive anatomy, tracking your cycle, nutrition by trimester, fitness by trimester, everything that you have to like piece together by yourself. I put it all in one place. So you can find that. It's linked in my Instagram bio, or it's helloempowerhealth.com/pregnancy academy. I've actually had some beta testers in there for about a year. So we've been very intentional about making it a really high quality product, and I'm opening that again soon, for all of my little mamas to be.
Oh my God, you guys. I know that pregnancy is so overwhelming, but it must feel good, or it brings me comfort at least, to know that there are people like Amanda out there that are available to you and happy to help. And they do have the answers that may not be readily available, but that we're all searching for. Oh my goodness, you guys. I hope this episode was as helpful for you as it was for me, and I will see you in the next episode. Be sure to follow Amanda on social media. You can find me at Tranquility by HeHe and at the.birth.lounge. Until next time, head to your app store and download the Birth Lounge app for evidence-based childbirth education and data-driven postpartum support delivered straight to your phone. Bye!
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I truly do value this community, and I love hanging out with you. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent. It's an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with a friend. Share it with someone who could use evidence-based information to help them have an informed and confident birth. I'd love to hear what you have to say and read your sweet words. By leaving us a review, you are helping other expectant mamas and their families find the podcast so that we can reduce birth trauma and improve maternity care in the U.S. one birth at a time. If you're interested in joining the Birth Lounge, go to thebirthlounge.com. If you want to connect with me on socials, you can find me at Tranquility by HeHe on all platforms. Until next time, stay educated, stay supported, stay confident. Bye!